This video will explain about the Luxembourg Lieutenant Representative. Today, His Royal Highness Prince Guillaume of Luxembourg, also known as the Hereditary Grand Duke, was made Lieutenant Representative by his father. This required the prince to make a special oath at Parliament to uphold the Constitution. Becoming Lieutenant Representative will allow Prince Guillaume to perform some of the duties of monarch. So let's look closer at what a lieutenant representative is. This position currently only exists in Luxembourg. The lieutenant representative is a member of the royal family who is formally appointed to represent or act as monarch. This is usually the heir apparent, but Article 42 of the Constitution does not require it to be the heir. It just requires it to be a prince of the blood. To create the lieutenancy, Grand Duke Henri had to sign a decree at the Grand Ducal Palace declaring Prince Guillaume as his lieutenant representative. The prince then had to make an oath at Parliament to observe the Constitution. As for the word lieutenant, it means second in command. The word comes from the French, which literally means sort of placeholder. So the lieutenant representative is the placeholder representative for the monarch. You may know lieutenant as a position in the armed forces. However, it is not being used here in a military context. I think it is important to emphasize that Grand Duke Henri is not abdicating, although this is sort of the first step in that process. He probably will abdicate in a few years' time, as we have seen with other Grand Dukes and Grand Duchesses. Grand Duke Henri remains monarch and head of state with all of his powers. By appointing Prince Guillaume as lieutenant representative, Henri is granting certain powers and duties to his heir, but he is not giving up any of those. And this is all made very clear by the speech that the President of Parliament made when Prince Guillaume was there to make his oath to the Constitution. The President stated that Prince Guillaume is second in command at the side of the Grand Duke. He emphasized that the Grand Duke remains head of state and that the lieutenant representative may represent him in his important responsibilities. And he referred to Prince Guillaume as invaluable support. So it is very clear Henri is still head of state, he is still in power, but we are giving some of that responsibility to the son. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering how this differs from the things you're already familiar with, an abdication and regency. With an abdication that is usually permanent, the current monarch steps down. They give up all of their powers and duties, and the heir becomes the new monarch. This is a way of passing down the job without the monarch having to die. With a regency, this could be temporary or it could be permanent. The current monarch is usually, for some reason, unable to perform their duties. This can be due to illness or age, and for some monarchies like Denmark or Norway, we'll see this because the monarch is abroad. And in this case, the heir to the throne, or another adult, will become acting monarch with some of the powers and duties of the monarch. In some cases, they have limited powers. In some cases, like we see in Liechtenstein, that has a permanent regency, they have full powers. There are some variations on a regency, like the UK's Councillors of State. There, when the monarch is unable to perform their constitutional duties, usually due to something like a big illness or they are abroad. They can have two counselors of state, which are members of the royal family, perform certain duties on their behalf. With abdication and regency, there's usually only one person at a time who is acting as monarch. With a lieutenancy, the current monarch keeps their position and all of their powers. The heir to the throne is given this position as sort of lieutenant representative, acting monarch, and they will have some of the powers and duties, but we still have the monarch who's there, able to perform it all. It is unclear how much duties Grand Duke Henri is going to pass on to his son. He could be passing on sort of everything right now, or we could see him just sort of pass on a handful of tasks, especially those that may require travel abroad. Grand Duke Henri is not abdicating now. We do expect him to do so in the future. There's been a history of having these lieutenancies for a few years and then abdicating. Often, when you're able to kind of plan ahead your abdication, we see monarchs will choose important milestones. So for Grand Duke Henri, we may see him choose one of these upcoming milestones.